to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Debbie Vivasi Babu, shareholder at Darcy and Devassy PC. Thanks for joining me, Debbie.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate you calling me.
No, it's glad to have you on here. You know, I think I had Brittany on like over a year ago, and I was like, I need to get Debbie on this program at some point. So it's great to see your face. Before we hit record, I saw you a week ago in Arizona, but I think every time that we saw each other, we were in conversation, which seems to happen
Yeah.
over.
Well, that's like the best part about the annual conference, right? Is the networking aspect. So there were a lot of people I saw from afar, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I have to say hi to them." But then you get intercepted by somebody else. You can't make it across a room without stopping every couple feet. So it's a good problem to have, I guess. But I saw you from afar too, and we just didn't get a chance to actually meet up.
Yeah, it's like trying to navigate the opening reception and everything. You're just like, how do I stick to this? Where do I go? Yeah, it's challenging, but hey, it's a good problem to have, right? Not like when we first got in the industry and it's like you don't know anyone.
For sure, for sure.
So, Debbie, for those people who haven't had the privilege of meeting you yet, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and your career to date in equipment finance?
Sure. My name is Debbie Devassy Babu, and I'm a shareholder at Darcy and Devassy, as you mentioned. We're a boutique law firm in Chicago. We are 7 lawyers, and we've been in this equipment finance space for more than 25 years as a firm, as a prior firm that we split from in 2008. So we've been involved in the LFA for a couple of decades. We exclusively represent lenders and asset-based transactions. We do a little transactional work, but we primarily do workout, bankruptcy, and litigation work. For me personally, like everyone, I got into equipment finance by accident and never left. I graduated law school in 2004, and I was looking for a job in litigation. And I papered the world with my resume. This is back when you had to actually send cover letters and hard copies of your resume. I think I sent it out to 100 small and mid-sized firms in Chicago because I knew firm size what I wanted to do. And one of the firms that gave me an interview was one that did equipment finance, and I joined them in September of 2008. And I, started, and I was like, "What is equipment finance?" Like, it's just that sounds weird and random.
Sure.
And came to obviously realize the scope of it and became really involved both on the litigation side and just understanding the UCC and all the law pertinent to this industry, and obviously become really involved in ELFA and with folks like you. So it's been an interesting journey. I think the joke is like it's mafia, right? You don't, unless you die or retire, you're just not getting out. So
Sure.
So I think I think that's true for me. It's been 19 years now. So
that's awesome. That's fantastic. Are you originally from Chicago?
Yeah, my parents actually was born in Canada, and my parents moved to the US with me when I was 3, and we moved around the Midwest for a while, but from the age of 10 onward, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. So I definitely consider Chicago home.
Got it. So no place they didn't at least like tease you with someplace nice and warm, just constantly where it's cold.
I mean, when I'm in warm places like Phoenix last week, or visiting family in California, I'm like, why don't I live here? What am I doing? So yesterday was Halloween, and it snowed, and there's still snow on the ground and in the trees. And yesterday was one of those days when I took my kids trick-or-treating. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, why do I live in this place that's 30 degrees on October 31st? So no, my family's here, and I've got so many friends and connections here that as much as I enjoy warm weather vacations, it's hard to imagine living someplace else.
Yeah, I mean it was unseasonably warm last week for the conference. It's cooled down in the last. It's corrected itself, where it's like you need a little sweatshirt now out here
Oh,
at night
okay.
in the morning.
Yeah, it was
So
really warm. I mean, I was like, is this normal for you guys? Because I don't get me wrong, I didn't mind it leaving Chicago, but so it was a little hot at 100 degrees last week.
got it. So you're the firm's been around 7 people. You've been around for 25 years, doing practice in every state. Just equipment finance. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, so we only represent lenders, so all on the creditor side, but we represent banks, national, regional, local, independents, captives, kind of everybody on the creditor side. We are not licensed in every state, but we do handle some cases for our clients on a nationwide basis because we've got either a network of local counsel or we know attorneys or we can find attorneys and we kind of draft everything and know what to do. So we make sure nothing dumb is filed in another state and we'll draft it all. So yeah, but we do represent some of our clients on a nationwide basis.
Got it. And one of the topics I wanted to go into next was on thoughts on the equipment finance industry. I mean, I stumbled in it like you in 2005, and
yeah,
the Mafia, Hotel California, one of those references.
All of those analogies work for it, sure.
So it's I wanted to see, do you remember the first conference that you went to, Debbie, and what that experience was like?
I do, because I went to the legal conference. It was like April or May, no, May of 2008. And I had gotten married in April of 2008. So that's how I kind of remember the timeline. And who later became my law partners at the time were my bosses, Thomas Gunas and Alex Darcy. They took me and they introduced me to everyone. They knew everybody. So it wasn't that intimidating, kind of what you alluded to earlier, like standing in the room and not knowing anybody. But so they took me around, introduced me to everybody. But everyone was so friendly too. And so I do remember walking in just being like, I don't know what to expect or what to think. And I attended the conference part, which was the, continuing education credits and learning about the industry kind of thing, but also the networking, and people were just so friendly. And, I'd go every year, and over time I just developed friends where I didn't need someone else to sort of introduce me. Everyone's so friendly too that you end up just speaking to a lot of different people, even whether you know them well or not.
What an interesting time to come into this industry.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. So I had been practicing for a couple of years at that point, but obviously, it was the beginning of the Great Recession and then post Great Recession. So I was very busy as a, litigator and workout attorney. Yeah. Sort of at the height of it. But it was a really interesting time to come to my first ELFA event. I had been practicing for 4 years before that, but the recession just put it into another category altogether, I think.
Sure. I mean, it was, I remember some of the conferences. I got into equipment finance in 2005, and, first couple of years, fine. And then all of a sudden you started 08, 09, and the amount of people at conferences was like, ooh, holy cow.
Yeah.
On here. And I guess with your line of business, that could definitely see where it's like, okay, this is going to be crazy. And then, we've been pretty much going like this for a while now. Maybe it's getting back to, well, hopefully it'll never be back to 08, 09 levels. But I'm sure there's activity that's been picking based on, state of the economy for the last 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, it definitely seems like we're due or overdue for a downturn, right? I mean, not that we want anything 2008, 2009 level, but it's cyclical, and what we expect there to be a change at some point. We can't just keep going up. So I think probably next year sometime is what we'll see.
Yeah. And then, you brought up a good point where you said, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, what was the first conference you attended? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, yeah. My first conference was actually a NEFA conference.
Okay.
In September of 2005. And that regional event maybe had a couple hundred people there.
Okay.
But walking into it as a 23-year-old, there's cliques of people all over the place. Everyone's having a good time, like they know each other. And I'm kind of like, oh. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really intimidating. And I think one thing that ELFA definitely has done is trying to get obviously attract more younger folks and people with less experience in the industry, and try to make them feel at home or welcome, like mentorship programs, and just like having a first time attendees reception, just to make people feel a little bit less intimidated, because it really is intimidating if you don't know anybody and you walk into a room of hundreds of people and you're trying to
Absolutely. Well, so my first ELFA event was Hurricane Wilma.
Oh, well, that's memorable.
So you talk about coming in with a bang or a splash or whatever. That actually worked to my advantage, because instead of there being 1,200 people at that event, there was probably maybe 40% of that number.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it allowed me to come in, golf, meet a certain number of people, and then it was more of an intimate setting, and it's one of those experiences that you shared with those attendees.
Right.
So
that's good. That's a good introduction. Good way to meet a smaller group of people or develop a bond with them. And
not are you going to take my phone call? We hunkered down in a hotel together without electricity, but we still ate shrimp and drank beer. So
right. So it ended up still being a good conference overall. Yeah.
I mean, all things considered, it was unfortunate for Florida at the time, but silver lining for me. But I remember getting on a plane in New York, and I think there was 4 of us on the plane.
Oh wow.
maybe I made a bad choice.
Right. That's funny.
So I think our paths first crossed at a business service provider steering committee. I think we were on that together.
Yes.
My memory serves me.
Yeah, and now I can't even rember the year, because post-pandemic, my sense of time is completely screwed up. But yes, we were on the committee together, and that's how we sort of first got to know each other, which was nice. And I don't think until I had joined, or a couple maybe years before I joined, didn't even realize how everything worked and how there's all these smaller groups. And it's a really good way to get involved and to get to know other people that are like so.
Yep. And were you ever on Emerging Talent?
No, I wasn't. I think I was an odd age where I was like too old for Emerging Talent, but
I
relatively
what
young.
That means, because there's some people on there that are older than me, and I'm like, I guess I just never emerged, or I'm just
Yeah.
like
you're like you're still in your cocoon. You haven't emerged yet. I think at the time in which, if I really think about it, joking aside, when eTech was created, I think at that point I had been in the industry for like 10 years or whatever. I was no longer emerging, so I couldn't be on eTech. I think that's how it. But I hear what you're saying. There's people that are the same age as me, or not very much younger, and they're on there, but they might be new to the industry experience wise, and I think that's really the measure is.
I just gotta bust someone's shop because I was like not included in it, and I'm like, whatever. Like,
right.
I'm gonna go back to that. I just haven't emerged because it sounds funny. But what's interesting, going back to your first conference where you were introduced to everybody, I'm sure you're probably like, didn't we just compete with them on this particular banking relationship, and now we're shaking hands and talking to them and everything else? And that's kind of one of the things I enjoy. Another thing I enjoy about equipment finance is, what is it, friend petition or frenemies, or one of those things where it's like, as much as you compete potentially, or you share clients, everyone seems to share ideas and come together. And I think that's really unique to our industry compared to
for sure
other segments.
Actually, you're reminding me of something that's almost embarrassing. When I first went to the conference, because I was meeting all these people who I had spoken with on the phone or emailed with, whether it was other attorneys at other law firms, or in-house attorneys for our clients, or dealing with a case or a transaction, I almost felt like I was like meeting celebrities. Like I was almost starstruck, as dumb as that sounds. Like, oh my God, you're Joe Smith, like the Joe Smith of company XYZ. I can't believe I'm finally meeting you. probably thought I was very strange for reacting like that, but you've been communicating with somebody for a long time, but you never actually meet them. It's kind of strange, right? So meeting a lot of people, seeing the name tags and seeing all these names I recognized. I remember being sort of starstruck, if one can be starstruck at Alpha.
Well, and now the younger generation, like I guess post-COVID generation coming in, they'll
Yeah.
never really have that because like you talk via Zoom right now, almost
Yeah.
or Teams, almost all the time. Very rarely am I actually on a phone call where I'm
I
not looking
agree.
at somebody. So, you know,
Yeah, but
to
you're
your
right.
point,
Prior to the
probably,
pandemic, prior
yeah,
to the pandemic, video calls were not that, video meetings and stuff were really not that common. So I hardly, there were so many people I talked to for years and I didn't meet till much later. I guess there's still some folks maybe I haven't met in person yet, but so it was a kind of fun feeling to meet all these people I had talked to forever but never met.
nope, absolutely. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit if you don't mind. So, your first conference in 2008, fast forward 15 years now to 2023. I want to talk about the women in leasing, or just, I guess, just the diversity of our industry.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think ELFA, the industry has been more intentional on DEI and women in leasing. Monitor does a great job with that as well. Just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to kind of get your thoughts to see how we as an industry are being more intentional on it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really great the strides that have been made, and obviously we need to continue the momentum and keep going. On the women in leasing side, I remember first attending one of the breakfasts. There were all these like 7 a.m. breakfasts until somebody, me and a couple of people were like, after a couple of years, can we meet at another time other than 7 a.m.? I mean, it's a little painful to get up that early when you've been networking the night before. So then it eventually was turned into a cocktail hour, which was really nice. Um, so I feel like it depended on the conference, but for instance, like the legal conference, the Women in Leasing Breakfast, I feel like there were maybe like 40 women there or less. And now I think it's just everything has just grown so much. And I think that's awesome. And it's such a great thing to see. And obviously the Women's Council is an established committee and has been for years. And that committee's putting on events and they're being really well attended. So I think there's obviously always been a real interest in this and kind of advocating for women in this industry. And it's awesome to see that come to fruition. And I think the people that are involved in the committee are just really energizing people, those that I know, and they just want to keep it going, which is awesome. On the DE and I side, I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of years on and off. ELFA, I don't remember when they first brought it up, but it was a couple of years ago. Let's say, I don't know, 6 to 7 years ago. I remember we should do this. And it was maybe generic, as everybody was a little bit more generic when they didn't know what to do. Um, but it's like, we really want to push for that. We want to push for there to be diversity among speakers on panels. And I really think ELFA's done a really nice job with that. You know, again, there continues to be, there's still strides to be made, but I think kind of the fruits of their labor are starting to pay off, and I think, post pandemic, post 2020, more companies, more of my clients, everybody's just more focused on it in a different way. And like, let's make some concrete plans on how are we really going to implement this. For me personally, I just rolled on to the equity committee, which is great. I just attended the equity forum in New Orleans in September. And so that has been in existence, I want to say, for 2 years or 3 years. Scott Thacker was the chair. He just rolled off, and Delroy Stauffer just rolled on as the new committee chair. So this is my first year on that committee, but I have to tell you, I have to give a little plug for the equity forum. It was awesome. It was very different from any other ELFA event I've been to. I usually go to the legal conference, credit collections, capital connections, and then the annual conference. It's just completely different because it's really talking about why is DE&I important? What is like the economic impact? How do we actually implement this? and what are some strategies going forward. So, and then I think on the networking side, it was nice to have, I think there was 70 or so folks there, and it's a day and a half. It was tacked on to, I think the Ops and Tech conference, which I don't attend, but it was tacked on. So some people stayed for that. So I really felt like I got to network and meet new people with a smaller group and really get to know everybody. So I think it's awesome that there have been strides made, and I think everyone's just going to keep going. Is the hope, and that's the direction we're going in. And I think it's necessary. Sorry if I'm rambling. It's necessary. We need to attract, younger folks. We need to attract, diverse folks into this industry if we want to keep it going, because a lot of people are aging out. They're retiring. They're leaving the industry for one, I guess retirement or death, as we said. But that's really, if we want to keep this going, and we really got to attract new people to this industry. So I think these are wise investments that as an industry we have made, and we need to keep investing.
No, and that's always the question for me. It's, you go into some parts of the country and there's just like, well, we just don't have any non-white applicants for our jobs. And it's, I think when you go to forums like that and say, okay, well, this is how you go out and search for those candidates. I think that's really important. And
that was definitely a piece that was a big part of what was discussed. And like, there were great examples given about this, because people tend to look within their own network of people, or that share similar backgrounds.
It's the comfort, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, this is my buddy, but are you just going to be a yes person, or are you going to have someone who challenges you and gives you a different level of thinking? That's powerful.
For sure. Yeah. And then it becomes, people tend to stick with people that are similar to them. So then do you have that diverse pool of candidates if you're looking to your own network to hire? And so that was the equity forum really drove that point home with a lot of illustrations. It was very interactive, like the panels, and you weren't just there in the audience listening to somebody talk about it. They were really good about involving everybody. And then you start to see, oh, gee, I see how this pool of talent then just becomes like this narrow. If somebody says, well, I really want someone from the school I went to, which is predominantly white and Christian or whatever, so it just, it was very good at kind of pointing that out.
That's good. That's good, because at least it's showing examples. It's like, let me show you, not tell you, which is perfect.
Yes.
Right.
Which is always a more effective way to learn.
That's how we're going to be able to push this thing forward,
For sure.
The nature of it.
Yeah.
So we're going to have some real fun now and talk about some legal stuff. So
I hope nobody falls asleep when we talk about the legal stuff. Sometimes it's boring to me, and I have to live and breathe it. So it probably could really be boring to other people.
No. So we've had some recent updates with 1071. I think not even a week ago.
Yes, 1071.
Talk about that.
Sure. So 1071 is kind of funny, right? Nothing happened for a solid decade plus, and now suddenly there's all this flurry of activity. So I think everyone knows and was sufficiently freaked out that the CFPB finally issued rules on 1071 after 12 or 13 years of kind of doing nothing on that.
Yeah.
So they issued these rules, which were going to have these pretty onerous requirements for lots of different things: gathering information on borrowers, reporting, credit, separating the person that's gathering this sensitive information from the decision maker. And, frankly, some of the big banks, they probably have these things already in place, or they can implement them. But the smaller lenders out there they were really going to have to revamp the way they do business and the software and systems really in place. And some, even smaller companies, they're not going to have the person taking in the application is probably the one making the credit decision. So there are a lot of costs, obviously, that were associated with it, a lot of panic. And it was supposed to, the rules are supposed to be in effect October 1st of 2024. So lots of inactivity for a long time, and then suddenly there was some activity. What happened in Texas federal court, the Texas Bankers Association and the ABA filed a lawsuit against the CFPB. So CFPB, not on 1071, but some other issue is up before the Supreme Court. It's related to their how they're funded and whether they're constitutional or not. So basically, the what happened in Texas was that the ABA and Texas ABA, they were able to obtain an injunction stating that their members, which were banks, should not have to start this implementation process until the Supreme Court makes a ruling on whether the CFPB is, for all intents and purposes, like legal. So, so that sort of segued the industry because everybody's not a bank, right? So, then ELFA got involved with another party, intervened in the lawsuit in Texas, was successful in that, and then filed a motion for an injunction as well, saying basically, well, yes, you've allowed this injunction to apply to these banks, but we think it should apply to everybody so that nobody's at an unfair advantage. So last week, I think it was October 26th, so not even a week ago, the Texas court entered the injunction that ELFA and some other parties had asked for. So and I know Andy Fishburne at ELFA and the other folks have sent out a couple different notices on that. We've probably all seen it in our inbox.
It's like you just did a presentation on this, man. Come on. Like.
Yeah, right, exactly. So what's happened? So what this does is it sort of buys time, because the Supreme Court's not expected to rule until like I think the end of June next year. So that whole time that this is in limbo is going to be added essentially to the implementation time. So I think Andy has indicated the net effect is it's essentially like a 10-month delay. So that October 1st, 2024 date gets pushed back plus or minus about 10 months. So it's not that it's gone away unless there's some other lawsuit or some other thing that happens, which is always possible. But the short time frame that everybody was really worried about, we've got some wiggle room on that now.
Yeah, that's one of those questions where I looked at that ELFA announcement and I'm like, so you're just basically kicking the can down the road. And this is my opinion. Eventually something's going to be coming. Hopefully organizations are at least thinking about it as opposed to continual procrastination.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think most of the clients and stuff I've spoken with, I mean, they're like, well, we're going to keep going with what we're doing. So we're ready by the time it happens, but it just gives us a little bit more time to make sure we're doing this properly. And again, for those smaller lenders, I mean, some of them, I think they're waiting on software to be developed for this. They just don't have the programs to do this. And so if you're waiting on other folks, that's another reason why having a little bit of extra time is helpful. From what I understand, I didn't listen to it or watch it or anything, but the oral arguments on that CFPB case, I don't think that they're necessarily gonna say, yep, CFPB, you're gone. Besides 1071, there's like a lot of different things that the CFPB does and lots of rules, and it would be very chaotic, I think, if the CFPB or if the Supreme Court invalidated the CFPB. So I think that's sort of a long shot, but it does buy everyone some time to have a little bit more time to implement.
Nope. And thank you for that update there. And then regarding the state disclosure laws.
Another exciting topic.
Is this just the beginning of this chaos, or we have Texas, but not Texas, California, New York, New Jersey. I think there's another dozen or so that are right next up in line.
Yeah, so California and New York for sure, and California is the one obviously everybody was panicking over last year, and that's I think it's safe to say it's one of the most onerous, which is not surprising because California, as we all know, is very much a hand-holding state. They just, it doesn't matter that's a commercial transaction. A lot of those consumer rules and indulgences are sort of bleed into commercial transactions as well. So yeah, that was California, New York for sure. ELFA has a great page on its website with a map of the United States that sort of gives an overview of like which states are in what category right now. So I do have the list here. So there's also disclosure laws in Utah, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, and Connecticut, though California is the most onerous, and I think New York is probably second. And I think there are a lot of exceptions to these disclosure rules that sort of carve things out, which is good for some of these other states that implemented the disclosure laws. There is legislation introduced and active in a bunch of states. So Kansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Texas, Illinois, North Carolina, New Jersey, and Maryland. So, ELFA is trying to get a whole suite of exemptions for like 2A leases, PMSI, captive, and bank subsidiaries. So varying degrees of success probably is what we can expect with the different legislatures in different states. Sure. Scott Reel would definitely know the most up to date, but I think that's sort of the overview. But I think overall, and this is sort of a legal trend, I think a lot of people like me are seeing the bleeding of the consumer and the commercial. It's just really, and there used to be, I think, a much clearer line, both in statutes and in cases. And now we're just starting to see it more and more. And, they're not the same animal, but some courts and some jurisdictions treat them as the same animal. So it can be frustrating.
Yes, and some of those states are interesting. There's not one thing. It's like,
yeah. Well, and I think what happens, it just drives out businesses, right? Like businesses are like, well, the cost of doing business here is so expensive, or I'm going to be facing some crazy lawsuit or crazy class action. I just don't want to even fund anything in California. I mean, we have clients that just say, yeah, we really don't want to, we want to avoid California as much as we can, but it's obviously a big economy source of revenue, but they just would rather not deal with it than jump through all the hoops.
Nope, that makes sense. Thanks for those updates there, Debbie. And you probably saw a nose pop up in the air. Apparently my dog likes it when we talk about disclosure laws.
I'm surprised he decided to pop in at that point in the conversation. That seems like not a very interesting time. He's super cute. What's his name?
Arctic.
Arctic. Okay.
Can you please go somewhere else, dog?
Is it always a pet or a child will interrupt like every Zoom meeting at some point? It's no.
Like the way I record these, I can see if Rory comes out of her room, and I'm like underneath the camera, like stop. And she'll always find things. Get in there just a little bit. Just wants to say hi.
Yeah. All right.
But at least I think it's more receptive now, post pandemic, as opposed to pre. Then you'd be like, oh my god.
Yeah. You're really mortified. I remember the beginning of the pandemic. My kids were not, if I could just go off on a tangent for a second.
Sure.
My kids were like at home for school. They were on Zoom. The courts were closed, but they were doing Zoom conferences at that point. And I remember like on a hearing with the judge. Now I just, I was waiting for my case to be called, but my camera was on and my daughter burst. I was going to be next. My daughter burst into the room where I was working and she was like, have you seen my book on lizards? And then I was like, oh my God, like I'm trying to, mute it. And she's like, oh, sorry. And just laughed. I'm like, oh my God, just don't come in if the door's closed. The judge didn't say anything. He didn't react, but I'm sure that would have been enraging pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic. It's like, whatever. Someone's going to be shouting about lizards in the background. Yeah. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, if he or she had a sense of humor, I would have put it in my ruling.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Debbie, I ask everyone who comes on here to give me a little fun fact about themselves. So, outside of equipment finance or even law, what do you enjoy doing in your free time?
Definitely travel now, especially now post-pandemic that we can. It has been nice to travel again. I grew up, my parents are Indian immigrants. They came to Canada. I mentioned I was born there. when they were in their 20s. And so growing up as a kid, we went to India very frequently, every 2 years or 3 years. And then my parents we'd always stop somewhere in Europe or somewhere else in Asia. And so my parents were very big on travel. For them, it was necessary to see their parents and their siblings. So they were willing to make a pretty onerous trip. But so I think that sort of instilled a love of travel for me. Yeah, I do that now with my husband and kids. And my kids have been to India a couple times. My 12-year-old has been there 3 times, and my 9-year-old has been there twice. Most of those were nightmare trips for us as parents because they were very young and it was like painful. But I think they've become good travelers as a result. And we went to Italy in August, and that was a really great trip. So last few trips we've taken internationally where the kids are a little bit older, it's kind of different ball game. But definitely enjoy travel and seeing experiencing new cultures, eating good food. Definitely something I enjoy.
Favorite place you've been to?
Oh my gosh, that is that's difficult. There's so many great places. I do love Italy, and having just went there recently, it sort of revived my appreciation for it. I've only been to Spain once, and I really would love to go back there. India has a lot to offer in terms of things to see. There's a lot more conveniences in life, like accommodations. Everything's 1,000% better than when I was a kid growing up. So there's some, I'm almost numb to it because I've been there so many times and mainly seeing family that I forget that there's like, hey, there's the Taj Mahal. There's all these other things to see. So when I go to the sightseeing part, I'm like, this is really cool. I see why people come from all over the world for this. So yeah, I would say probably Italy, Spain, my top two, and India's in there somewhere too. I have to provide a shout out for my for the home country.
I've been to Spain. I've been to Italy. I haven't been to India yet, but I definitely want to go.
Well, if you do, let me know, and I'll give you some recommendations. But there's a lot to see.
Recommendations would be good because sometimes that food likes me and other times it hates me. So I want to be like walking around that country like an along came Polly person,
Right.
And then I guess my last question I have for you, Debbie, is at the end of the day, with the law firms in equipment finance, why should a funding source or any equipment finance organization want to do business with Darcy and Devassy?
Well, we're definitely specialized in this. This is kind of all we do. We don't do any other, we're not doing like family law or other practice areas. I mean, we're really hyper focused on this. So I think we know the industry really well. We know this area of the law really well. And we'll take care of you if you come to us.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time, Debbie. It's great seeing you. Hopefully our paths cross sometime before the end of the year. But if not, I think isn't the legal forum in Arizona next year?
Yeah, it's in Scottsdale. It's in Scottsdale in May. So I'm looking forward to going back there then. It might still be snowing here. So I'm good with going to Scottsdale in May. It has snowed in May before, so it would not be the first time.
I'm not going to jinx that, so I'm going to stay. But I really appreciate your time. It's great having you on the program today, and good luck. And we'll be talking soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Take care.